Hello, everyone. Everyone sitting at the Fantasy Fest and everyone watching this afterwards. Welcome to a very special interview. Our very special guest. And there is apparently a ghost here. Would he kindly shut the door? Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Welcome to our very special guest interview. And this evening is a cooperation between the Uppsala City Library, the English Bookshop, and of course Eurocon, which will be held in Uppsala in the beginning of June. If you want to know more about Eurocon, please stay on a bit after the interview is done. But without further ado, here is our very, very special guest star of the day, Marissa Meyer. Welcome, Marissa.
Hello, thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Of course, we're ever so pleased to have you here. And this is, of course, is a very special day for all the young people listening in the City Library. They will be watching you today, and for us too. But I'm not doing any more talking now, not until the interview is over. So I'm very happy to leave you in the safe hands of Elsa. Elsa and Marissa, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Elsa.
Hi, it's so lovely to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
I've been a fan of your books for a very long time, so it's great to meet you.
I appreciate that.
I figured we should start off by just asking you to tell us a bit about yourself and about your books.
Sure, yes. So I'm Marissa Meyer. Hello, thanks for joining me today. And I am the author of many books for young readers. I'm the author of the Lunar Chronicles series, which is retellings of classic fairy tales set in the distant future. The Renegades trilogy, about a superhero and a supervillain who start to fall in love. Heartless, which is a prequel to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. My newest books are Gilded and Cursed, which is a fantasy retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, and other things. I feel like there's a lot. The list kind of keeps getting longer. I am also the host of a weekly podcast called The Happy Writer, where I get to talk to other authors, and we talk about books and writing and what brings us joy. And I am a mom. I have 2 8-year-old twin girls.
All right. I just finished reading your Gilded book, and I loved it. Absolutely. Yeah, so you've been doing this writing thing for quite a long time. And I figured, so today, obviously, we're seeing a lot of self-published books hitting the market. And I think, well, I don't know what it's due to, but I think TikTok has something to do with it. And I was just wondering what your journey to being published has looked like.
Yeah, so my journey, I mean, if you want to go way, way, way back,
yes, please.
I'm one of those writers where I knew that I wanted to be a writer since I was really little. I always loved books. I always loved coming up with stories and was always kind of living in this fantasy world in my head when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I got into writing Sailor Moon fan fiction. And so for me, that was really how I kind of learned the overall craft of writing, how to write beginning, middle, end, how to build suspense, write dialogue, like all the nitty gritty, for me really about writing fan fiction. And then when I got into, so I think like in my late teens or so is when I started to think like, I would love to be published. I want to see my name on a book someday, and started attempting to write novels. And of course I have many, many novels that are left unfinished and abandoned and will never see the light of day. But then around 2008, I got the idea for Cinder, which was the first book of the Lunar Chronicles. And I had this idea of retelling the story of Cinderella, in which Cinderella would be a cyborg. And I love the idea. I love the premise. It took me about 2 years to write Cinder. And after that, it actually happened pretty quickly for me. I submitted to literary agents and signed with the first agent that I had sent it to.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I know it's a weird step, but it's very unusual.
Congratulations, though. That's amazing.
Yeah, and then she sent it to publishers on a Friday, and we had an offer to publish the 4-book series on Monday. So that part happened very quickly, and of course became my first books, my first series.
Yeah, and how many? So there are 4 books in the series now in this Lunar Chronicles, plus novellas, right?
Yeah, so there's the 4 core books. There's Fairest, which is a prequel novel. Stars Above is a collection of short stories and a novella. And then there's the 2 graphic novels, Wires and Nerve, which take place after the series, but have all the same characters in it. And then I also wrote this really goofy, like, choose your own adventure story called Cinder's Adventure, Get Me to the Wedding. And that was just like a really quirky little spin-off that I wrote in celebration of the 10-year anniversary. So yeah, so there's been a lot added to it over the years.
Yeah, I understand. Do you feel like that series is like, do you want to still revisit it, or do you feel like you're a bit finished with that world, or?
At this point, I feel finished with it. I was always really happy with where it ended, and I loved getting to do the graphic novels and the choose your own adventure story, and that was just pure joy, getting to be back in the world and hanging out with the characters again. But I don't really have anything more that I feel like I need to tell about that world and those characters. I feel pretty happy with where it all ended. That said, never say never. Like, if a really great idea came to me, I would certainly consider going back to it.
Yeah, I understand that, though, like letting the finished things be finished as well.
Yeah.
So moving on to one of your most recent, I guess not your own book, but you were editing a book called Serendipity.
Yeah.
How did you find the process of editing instead of writing?
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I loved it. I mean, I got to handpick the authors. And so for me, it was just like this great experience of getting to contact authors that I love, whose work I just adore and admire. And when they said yes, I was always just ecstatic to get to work with them. And they were all just so professional and so great. And their stories turned out fantastic. And so it was like, during the process of editing, once their stories started coming in, it was like a little present in my inbox every time, like, oh, another story. And I just loved it. I loved it from start to finish.
Oh, that's fantastic. So good to hear. And it looks like such a joyful book as well. I think we have it.
You have the other shoulder. Yes. It's a very beautiful, it's all sweet contemporary romance stories, all based around different, like, classic romantic tropes. So I think everyone had a lot of fun writing it, and I know I really loved working on it. So I'm glad that readers have been really responding to it.
Yeah, they really have. We've been selling lots of it.
Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. Speaking of that, do you have a favorite romantic trope that you seem to come back to? Or
I love many romantic tropes. Probably enemies to lovers, though, is my classic favorite. Yes, it's hard to beat. But I love the grumpy sunshine trope. I love the story that I wrote for that collection is the one bed trope, which was really fun to kind of spin it on its head and give it a PG rating. What else? Oh, the fake relationship. Like, that's always a classic too. So there's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they're all basically great.
There's a reason their tropes. There's a reason we come back to them again and again.
Yes, definitely. But then speaking about keeping things for younger readers, is there anything that you find difficult about writing for a younger audience? Or is it just fun?
For the most part, it's fun. I don't think all that much about writing for a younger audience when I'm writing. For me, I'm just writing a story that I would want to read. And I still read YA fiction all the time.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I'm not really thinking about like, okay, is this age appropriate or is this something that teenagers care about? I'm just trying to write a good story that hopefully people will connect with. That said, I just finished writing my second contemporary, which is called With a Little Luck, and it's the companion novel to Instant Karma, which was my first contemporary. And so these are the only two books I've written in the real world in modern times. And the biggest challenge of these books is like trying to write like a modern teenager, but you don't have to worry about that quite so much when you're writing fantasy or science fiction. But if you're writing about teenagers in the year 2023, it's like, okay, what music do they listen to? What are they wearing? What social media are they watching? What is the lingo, the vocabulary? And I don't know a whole lot of teenagers. So I had to like talk to a lot of my friends who have teenagers and be like, okay, so what do characters say this? How would they word this? And so it can be a little tricky that way.
Yeah, I can really understand that because it changes so fast as well. Like,
yes,
people use Snapchat for a year and then it's all of a sudden blasé, and it's hard to keep up.
Exactly. No, and you don't want to just automatically date the book, so it can be challenging.
Yes, exactly. But that's fun that you're working on your second contemporary.
Yeah, it was a blast. I love this book. It plays with Dungeons and Dragons is kind of a theme that goes through it, and magic, and I don't want to get into too much. Of course, don't want to spoil anything, but there's a couple of other beloved tropes in it as well.
Very exciting. Do you have a release date for it yet, or is that still up in the air?
I do, but do I know it off the top of my head? No. I want to say it's February of next year.
All right. That's something we'll keep our eyes open for. I was gonna ask. Yeah, so I was going to ask you, I guess it plays into the previous question a little bit, but have you ever felt like you wanted to kind of breach adult fantasy or like that genre more? Or like make it maybe, because I mean, Gilded does have quite a few darker themes and like gory details and such. But have you felt like you wanted more of that? Or are you happy with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Gilded is definitely my darkest that I have written so far. But honestly, no. So far, I have not wanted to venture into the realm of adult fiction or adult fantasy, which is not to say that it couldn't happen. Of course it could if an idea came to me. But I'm really, really happy writing YA. I feel like this is where I fit. It's the genre that I love the most as a reader. I would love to try my hand going younger at some point. I have ideas for middle grades, even some ideas for like early chapter books. But yeah, I am not currently tempted by the adult realm. I don't really know why.
No, but that makes sense though. If you're happy writing for your audience, then that's perfect, really.
There's something about YA that even in our darkest books, there still tends to be an optimism about it. And I love that. I love the emotional journey of characters experiencing so much newness in the world, first love, first kisses, all of this. With adult fiction, there's just tends to be a little bit more cynicism, a little bit more suspicion about the world. And that just doesn't appeal to me quite as much.
Understandable, definitely. I mean, I still read YA and I read a lot of fantasy to kind of get away from, the reality, I guess.
Reality.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so do you have any favorite YA authors at the moment or any like all-time favorites?
Oh my gosh.
Coming back to?
I love and hate this question.
Yeah,
How does one choose?
Too many.
I know. No, there truly are. Some of my auto-buy authors, Leigh Bardugo, of course.
Yes.
Laini Taylor. I saw she's coming out with a new graphic novel, so that'll be fun.
Yes.
Oh gosh, Maureen Gu for contemporary. I adore her work. There's so many. Robin
So sorry.
Lefevers. Yeah. Yeah, that's such a tough question.
Too many, yes. I'm sorry, I won't push you on that. But have you had any like role models since you were like a child, or a favorite author as a kid? Maybe.
I had a lot of books that I really loved as a child. As far as like a role model, like there was no author that I like tried to emulate, or like that really I feel strongly influenced my writing style or my writing voice. But definitely some favorites. I mean, Roald Dahl was one that I just devoured everything when I was a kid. Loved Anne of Green Gables. Yeah, what else when I was growing up? The Chronicles of Narnia. So a lot of the classics.
Yeah, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to, so you mentioned that you wrote Sailor Moon fan fiction when you were younger to get into like writing, basically. Have you ever read fan fiction of your own books?
Only once.
Only once.
When I first learned, this was years ago now, but when I first learned that there was fan fiction for the Lunar Chronicles, I was so excited and just like over the moon with how full circle it felt. And I was so honored because, of course, coming from a fandom background, I know that these are stories that are created with so much love. Like, to know that the books and characters spoke to readers enough that they wanted to then create their own story and stay in that world a little bit longer is like, there's just no bigger honor for a writer than that. So I was really excited, and I went and I looked on, this was fanfiction.net, again, a long time ago. And at the time there was maybe like 5 stories, and I read one, and it was from Kai's perspective, retelling one of the chapters from Cinder. And it was so sweet and so adorable. And as soon as I finished it, I was like, I need to not read these anymore. For a couple reasons. Like, one, I didn't want it to influence things that I had planned for the series. But then also, I thought, how would it have changed things for me if the creator of Sailor Moon regularly went and read fan fiction when I was writing it? And if I had known like there was a possibility that Naoko Takeuchi could have read my work, would I have felt weird about that? Would that have changed what I wanted to do? Would I have, felt more pressure to do stuff? And I just thought the fan fiction, it's not for me, it's for other fans and readers. So I kind of decided to step back and not read anymore, but I love that it's out there. I love that it exists.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it leads me to a question. Sorry, I've lost track of them. About actually, let's do one of the questions from the people listening. How do you turn a fairy tale into a retelling, and how much liberty can you take with the original fairy tale?
So that is totally up to the author. I think you can take as much liberty as you want with it. And you have examples of fairy tale retellings that are just really loosely inspired by a fairy tale and then take the story off in a totally different direction. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have fairy tales that really follow the story very precisely. I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle, my personal style. I like to, for the most part, follow the same beats of the plot in my stories. And I love to include little details from the original work, little Easter eggs that people who know the fairy tales really well might pick up on and be like, oh, that's a really clever detail, whatever. So for me, when I'm first getting started on doing a retelling, the first thing I do is I read through the source material. A lot of times I'll read different versions of that story from different cultures or different time periods. And I just start making a list of things that I want to include. And the things from the story that to me, in my mind, are like the most iconic elements of that story. So for Cinderella, I knew I wanted a slipper at some point. I knew there would be a ball. I knew there would be a wicked stepmother, a rags to riches storyline, this sort of thing. For writing Gilded and doing Rumpelstiltskin, I knew that I wanted to be spinning straw into gold. I knew that there would be a king that locked her up in the castle and ordered this of her. I knew that I had to figure out something to do with the baby in the story. Rumpelstiltskin, demands her firstborn child. Okay, what am I going to do with that? So I figure out like what are the things that I want to include. And from there, I just kind of start brainstorming. Okay, what is that going to look like in this world, in this time period, with this magic system that I'm developing? How does that change the story? How can I take that element and maybe twist it and do something new with it that readers might not be expecting? And a lot of time for me is just spent thinking and following the story down different paths. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And just kind of seeing where it goes. And eventually, ideally, it all kind of starts to form into a story that hopefully feels really familiar to readers, and that they're like, oh, I love this fairy tale, or maybe I don't like this fairy tale, but I'm curious to see what's going to be different in this version. And so I want that familiarity with it, while also hoping that readers will be surprised and like, well, I didn't expect it to go that direction. I'm kind of always trying to strike that balance.
Yeah, I understand that. I was wondering about, do you find it easier? Because obviously if some fairy tales have a lot more character focus, like maybe Cinderella, where you have like a lot of her personality in the original fairy tales and her way of being. Whereas in Rumpelstiltskin, I think they're a bit less of that and more like story driven. At least the way I've understood it. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But do you find it easier to work when you have more details or less about the characters? Since obviously they have to get their own stories through as well.
Yeah, it really depends on the fairy tale. And I think it kind of depends on a reader's interpretation too. But generally speaking, I feel like that's one of the things I love about doing fairy tale retellings, is that they give a structure. You have the bones of the story that then you can kind of dress up and do what you want with. But a lot of times the characters tend to be a big question mark. So you might have hints of what the character does or the choices that they make, but a lot of times the stories don't tell us why they do the things that we do. And so as a writer, it gives us so much freedom for figuring out, who is this character on a deeper level? What do they want? What is their goal here? Why are they making these choices? And then developing their personality. Is this a person who's, really determined and ambitious? Is it a person who's kind of shy and socially awkward? What are their skills? What are their passions? And you can really take it in so many different directions. And then you take that character that now you've kind of started to develop and put them in this story and see, how does that change things? How does that change the focus of, we still know that, the miller's daughter goes off to spin gold and makes these bargains with Rumpelstiltskin. But now that we know more about her, how does that change? How does that look different about why she's doing these things? And so I love that. I really enjoy that. Being able to take a character that we all sort of remember or feel like we know, and kind of putting my own spin on it.
Yeah, and I guess that's what makes the retelling so amazing to read as well. Because you know them, but you don't really know them in a way.
Yeah.
So what was the most difficult part about combining the different fairy tales for the Lunar Chronicles? Because obviously the different books have different focus people with Cinderella and Rapunzel.
I think I think the most difficult part was figuring out, as we got into the later books, figuring out how to keep every story continuing without ever resolving anything until the very end. So, in Cinder, we've pretty much followed the story of Cinderella up to the finish, but just leave off that last little bit, the part in the story where the prince takes the shoe and goes off and find her, which kind of means that tiny little bit of the fairy tale now has to stretch out for the next 3 books. Well, that's like a lot of space to fill with not very much information. So a lot of it becomes, okay, if Cinderella's story has ended here, but we're not done with Cinder and Prince Kai yet, okay, what am I going to do with her for the next 3 books? What other adventures is she going to have? What is pushing her forward? What is drawing her through this story? Similarly with Little Red Riding Hood, at the end of book 2, we've pretty much played out the story of Little Red Riding Hood, but we still have 2 more books with these characters. So, okay, now what are they going to do? And so then by the time you get into book 4 with Winter, now you've got all of these characters, and I have the story of Snow White to be guiding me as far as Winter's story goes. But now I need to be figuring out, okay, well, what are Cinder and Kai doing? What are Cress and Thorn doing? And so Winter was very much this kind of a jigsaw puzzle of a book where I felt like I had all of these subplots and all of these characters and all this stuff that had never been resolved that now all needed to be wrapped up, which is how you end up with an 800-page book, evidently.
Yeah, right, because the last one is a lot longer, right?
So long.
But that's good. We love that.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's like as a reader, that's like the perfect thing.
I'm so glad.
I think. So speaking of like not reading your own fan fiction, and and choosing what parts of the fandoms, I guess, to take part in, do you have a favorite way to interact with your readers?
Oh gosh. I mean, seeing people in person is always the best. I mean, it's so nice that we have social media, of course, and all that, and that we can do things like this. This is nice, but there's nothing like seeing someone and actually getting to shake their hand or give them a hug, or going on tour and going and doing book events and book signings and actually getting to, hear people's excitement, hear their stories about why the books meant something to them. That's just really special.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Definitely. Obviously living, because we're based in Sweden, so it's always quite far to get to like yeah, so it's like my favorite authors, and it's like they're in the US, so it's always been tricky. But I can imagine. And I was going to ask you about, so obviously Book Talk again has become such a huge part of like promoting books now. And I think a few authors have chosen to kind of take part in that discussion, or like to, I think, promote their own books as well. Do you have a TikTok account, or would you want to have one?
I do not have a TikTok account. I am a classic late adopter. Whenever there's a new social media platform, my assumption is that it will last for 6 months and then go away. And then I'm always surprised when things don't go away. So, I mean, I was one of the last to join Twitter. I was one of the last to join Instagram. And now I'm holding out on TikTok. So, yeah, a lot of it is that I really enjoy Instagram. I like the platform a lot. I feel very comfortable there. And I just don't think I have the capacity to add anything more. So I'm like, this is where my happy place is. And I hope that readers don't all abandon me and go elsewhere. I hope that Instagram continues to be a thing for a long time. And then luckily for me, I have a really involved publisher. And so they are a part of the Book Talk community, and they do Book Talk posts featuring my book sometimes. So I hope that's enough. I know authors love TikTok, but I
mean, some do. I think
some do, not
perfectly,
everybody, of course. Yeah.
No, I think it's perfectly all right to have a preferred format as well when it
Mhm.
comes to social medias. And I think TikTok is so specific as well.
Yeah. I'm not a video person. Like I hate doing reels. I hate showing myself selfies, all of that. Like I'll show you my bookshelves. I'll show you my covers. I'll show you my work in progress, but I don't like doing videos of me. I don't know. It weirds me out for some reason.
But I think that's understandable as well. It's especially when you're like, your work is your novels, your books.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. But have you noticed any difference since book talk? Because I mean, I know that I don't really post, but I'm on book talk a lot.
Mhm.
And I've seen especially Gilded pop up quite a bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah, a lot
Oh, that's
actually.
awesome to hear.
Yeah, it's great. So I've been wondering, like, have you noticed any difference in like people recognizing your books, or like have you noticed it affecting anything?
So I have not personally, but I am not the sort, like I don't pay attention to my sales. I don't watch to see where my books are ranked on Amazon. Like once a book is published and out, I just immediately get to work on the next book and try not to think about it too much. But I have heard through the grapevine from my publisher and other people that there are definitely, you can notice when Book Talk really gets excited about something, that there is an uptick. I know with Heartless had a moment on Book Talk when there was a lot of Heartless content coming out, and there was a big bump in sales and interest in Heartless when that happened. So like, that's awesome because I didn't have to do anything for that. And of course, always so nice to hear that people loved a book enough to then be recommending it and spreading the word about it. So yeah,
it's understandable as well that you don't want to, like, because a little bit what's done is done, I guess. It's like you don't want to keep
I mean, you can obsess over it, but what good is that going to do you, really?
Yeah, well, that's a good way to look at it, I think. So another question from one of the people listening at the City Library Fantasy Day is, what do you like about fairy tales, and have they played a big part in your life?
Oh, that is a good question. They have played a huge part in my life. So my interest in fairy tales goes back to when I was 5, and I saw The Little Mermaid in theaters, which I think was the first movie that I ever actually saw in theaters. And of course, I became obsessed with it, as every little girl in the 90s was. And I just loved this movie. And so my grandma heard that I was a big fan. And so she bought me a little book of fairy tales. And the first story in that book was The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. And so that was traumatic for me because I read it and was like, well, this is not like the movie.
Took a dark turn.
Yeah, it's such a dark story, a very sad, tragic story. And so I felt like Disney was lying to me. And of course, I still loved the movie. It didn't change my love for the movie, but it made me really curious about, well, okay, if Disney was wrong about all of this stuff, what else is Disney wrong about? And so then I started reading the Grimm's versions and the Perrault versions of different fairy tales. And then that led to an interest in reading folk tales from around the world and different cultures. And when I went to college, I studied fairy tale literature. And it's just kind of been this thing that I have been really intrigued by. And why? Why am I intrigued by this? I think part of it is that the stories are so much creepier than we think. If you only grew up with the Disney stories, a lot of people don't know like how truly dark and weird they can be. And even a lot of the ones, like, people will talk about like Cinderella and how the stepsisters cut off their toes and heel, which is like super creepy and bloody and gory and awful. but there are like, that's still pretty mild compared to what a lot of these stories have, where like mothers are chopping up their children and feeding them to their dads. And like, there's just bizarre stuff in these stories. And what does it say about me that I like this? I have no idea. I just think it's interesting. And I'm honestly, I'm fascinated by the idea that these stories have been around for so long, that so many stories we can see elements of them in stories from all over the world, that they're so universal. These same things just come up again and again across time and cultures. And I just think there's something really interesting about that. So yeah, fairy tales, they're awesome.
They really are. I can only agree. And like, I think there was a time in high school when I kind of found the like original, so like the darker versions, and I was just like changed.
Yeah, it does change you.
Yeah,
No,
it really
gives you
does.
a whole new perspective.
Yes. But on that note, do you have a fairy tale right now that's like on the back burner for something you want to do a retelling of?
I have a few, actually.
You.
Yeah, no, I love fairy tales. I suspect there will be many more retellings in my career. The one that I am probably going to be writing next is going to be a Bluebeard retelling.
Bluebeard. I hardly know who that is.
Oh, go read it. It's speaking of creepy, it's very creepy.
Oh, really? Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I really enjoyed the dark tones in Gilded, if you can't tell.
Well, there was more where that came from, so I'm glad you liked it.
Definitely. So do you tend then to kind of gravitate towards the darker versions of the fairy tales?
I do. Again, I don't really know why, other than maybe I feel like that just drums up more immediate conflict and suspense. If there's people dying everywhere, well, immediately we have concern for our protagonist, like bad things could happen here. So for a creative element of the story, I think dark naturally lends itself to some good storytelling.
Definitely. I think you're right about that. And it gives some depth to it.
Yeah. Which is not to say that like every fairy tale or every story has to be dark. Of course, I love bright, happy, whimsical stuff as well. It's kind of a case by case. What are you in the mood for?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read a ton of rom-coms as well.
Yeah,
it's about the balance.
It is. No, and it's funny for me in my career. I kind of feel like I switch back and forth. I'll do something that's really dark and more intense, more action oriented, and then I'll do something that's a little bit lighter and more cheerful. And it's a balance, like you say.
Yes. So I wanted to ask one more question from our listeners, which is probably a tough one, but what book has been your favorite to write so far?
That's a really tough one.
Yes.
It's
like asking you to choose between children, probably.
It's so hard. Do I have a favorite? It's funny because, writing, every book, of course, has its own challenges. No book just like writes itself. Every book has places where you kind of get stumped or there's something tricky that you have to work through. Do I have a favorite to write? I don't know. I think maybe Instant Karma, which was, again, my first contemporary. It felt like it was easier to write than a lot of my other books, possibly because it was my first contemporary. So it was like the first book I wrote where nobody died, and nobody was trying to kill one another. And there was no big revolution. Nobody had to start a war. Like, it was just two kids falling in love. And so it just felt simpler on a lot of levels. And that book also, I connected so strongly with the main character. Like, it was pretty much just writing myself at that age. And so just being in her head was really easy. Her voice was really easy. And that's not always the case. So it was just kind of a pure fun romp of a book to write.
That's amazing.
Having said that, I will say, like, I feel so accomplished every time I finish a new book. And so there's a little bit of like, every time I finish a book, well, that's my new favorite because wow, I did it,
Yeah, and I think that's a great feeling to have as well, and you should be really proud of your books. And yeah, actually, I have someone from a listener say that you should praise yourself because your books are absolute masterpieces. So you're very popular in this city as well.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
And so I listened to an interview that you did a while ago as well, where you talked about the National Novel Writing Month project. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so NaNoWriMo, as it's called, it happens every November, and it's the people who start. It's been going on for like 20 years or something now. The premise is that people all over the world join this challenge to try to write a 50,000 word novel during the month of November. And it's great on so many levels. One of the things I love about it most is that it just comes with this built-in community of writers. And for this 1 month out of the year, you know that you are not alone, that you are joined by millions of people all over the planet who are also doing this nutty thing of trying to write a novel in a month. Why? Why do we do this? It's just a fun challenge. And so there's a lot of support, a lot of people cheering each other on. And I think it's great for people who, maybe say, I'd like to write a novel someday, or like, this seems really fun, but I'm intimidated. It kind of strips away a lot of those concerns. And for 30 days, you know that it's not about being perfect. It's not about writing something that's going to get published or blow anyone away. Like, you're just taking on this fun challenge of trying to finish this story in this short period of time. And so it can be very motivating for a lot of people, and kind of encourage you for this short period of time to prioritize this, hobby or dream that you have. And so a lot of people get their start doing NaNoWriMo, and I think it's so great.
That sounds amazing. Like, it really does, like you said, like, kind of peel away the rest, everything that's distracting. I was wondering as well, speaking of, like, because you often get this advice that is just like, if you want to get published, you just need to write, which is probably true.
You might get published if you don't write.
Yeah, exactly. But do you have any like specific tips for like a program or an app that really help you organize writing for young people who want to get started?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of fantastic resources. The two things that I use the most, I do my writing in Scrivener, which is a software specifically for writers. And it's just really great for keeping your writing organized by kind of keeping all of your thoughts and inspiration and research all in one place. And for me, like, I'm constantly shuffling chapters around. And so when I used to write in Word, like, you would write the chapters and you'd be like, oh, this chapter is supposed to be over here. And then there's this whole mess of cutting and pasting. Scrivener makes all of that really easy. So it's just like a really practical software to use. And then my favorite resource for writers is Save the Cat. And Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. It's a structure writing guide that kind of breaks down typical plot structure, and it's so easy to follow, very logical information, just for people who want an idea of what are the main beats that I need in my story, and how do I get them to go together, and how do I get this story to build in a way that makes sense and has a satisfying conclusion. And it's all the sort of thing that a lot of us know instinctively, but when you actually see it written down, a lot can just like click, and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I need to do here. So it's not formulaic in that you can really take these main plot points and do anything with them. And it's just a really great resource for people. I use it all the time for every book.
That sounds really great. Definitely. And I'm sure that that's going to be really helpful to our listeners who want to get started. So I have another question from one of the listeners, which is, if someone hasn't read your books at all, which one should they start with?
Oh,
Which one would you recommend?
It is so subjective. Yeah, it's really, because I am not one of those writers that sticks in one genre. Even though all my books are YA, they're all very different from each other.
YA is such a wide genre as well.
I'm sorry?
YA is such a wide genre as well.
Absolutely.
It covers so many different subgenres.
Yeah, so I've got, the Lunar Chronicles is more science fiction, but I'd say they're a more kind of fun, adventurous romp story. Whereas Gilded is more high fantasy, definitely on the darker side. Instant Karma is my contemporary, if you like contemporary. Heartless is dark, but like in a whimsical way, because it's Wonderland. Renegades, superheroes. So really, it's like, what interests you? Read through the cover copy and see what grabs you the most, I guess, would be my recommendation.
Yeah, so there's no like Easter eggs sprinkled in that you can find if you read them in a certain order.
No. Yeah, I really want everyone to go read the Choose Your Own Adventure, Cinder's adventure story. However, that one does have Easter eggs from like all of my books. So like maybe save that one until you've read most of them, because then it'll be a lot more fun.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if that's like the latest one you did.
Yeah.
So the Gilded series, this is a very niche question, but since I've been on Book Talk, there was a short time where I was a bit confused, because there is another book by a different author the book is very, very different from yours, and it's called Guild, by Raven Kennedy, and it looks very similar to yours, and it has almost the same titles. I was just wondering, have you experienced any confusion with that?
Fans no, I'm not questions. Familiar. I have not heard of this book.
No, because the cover and obviously the titles are quite similar.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is it a retelling?
Curious. Yes, but I can't remember which fairy tale, and it's very much not YA. So it's hard when people ask about the wrong book.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I did not know.
All right, no worries. I was curious. Yeah. So at the moment, do you have a favorite fairy tale? I bet it changes all the time, but like
it changes all the time. Do I have a favorite fairy tale? No, not really. Because like I mentioned, my next one is going to be based on Bluebeard, and there's a story that it has a lot of the same themes of Bluebeard, called The Robber's Bridegroom, which is another one that is just weird and creepy and dark, and also a little obscure. Like, it's not one that a lot of people have heard of. So that one right now is like my recommendation. If you're looking for something weird and obscure, The Robber's Bridegroom is a good one.
Yeah. Could you at all summarize like Bluebeard? Like what is that fairy tale
Bluebeard, about? It's about a girl that marries this wealthy merchant, and then finds the bodies of all of his previous wives.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be changing things up, young adulting it a little bit. Yeah, that's the premise of the fairy tale.
That sounds very exciting and very mysterious as well. So I was wondering if you wanted to send out a little hello to the City Library Fantasy Day, for everyone who's here listening.
Hello, City Library Fantasy Day goers. I hope you're having an amazing time today, and I wish I could be there to join you in person, but I hope you've had a good time listening to us chat today.
Yeah, it's been really great chatting with you. And yeah, I think we should head over to Stina.
Thank you, Elsa. It was so
Yeah,
great to talk to
thank
you.
you. It's been great talking to you as well.
Hello again. Thank you so much, both Marissa and Elsa, because this has been an amazing interview. I had so much fun listening to you, and I learned so much. And now I want to read all the books I haven't yet read. So my reading list is just getting longer and longer. This is
a problem for us book lovers.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's always like that.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you again, Marissa. This has been amazing. I hope all of you viewers at the Fantasy Fest has had just as much fun as I have. And Elsa and Marissa, you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before we started, this has been a collaboration between the Uppsala City Library, the English Bookshop, and of course, Eurocon. And we at the English Bookshop just want to say hi, and please just pop across the street from the library if there is by any chance any books by Marissa you haven't read, you can find them there if you want to buy them. And yeah, exactly, just like that. And yeah, if you want to read any other fantasy stuff or indeed other stuff, we have plenty of great books to choose from. And if you want to know more about Eurocon, I think there will be a link to a webpage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Please visit eurocon2023.se. Basically, Eurocon is 4 days of science fiction and fantasy fun. There will be author visits, there will be panel discussions, there will be signings, there will be fans from all over Europe, and there will be so much fun. And if you're under 25, it's free. So please visit eurocon2023.se to find out more. And I hope we at the English Bookshop will certainly be there. Marissa, this is just sort of a little pre-taste. Unfortunately, you won't be there unless you will suddenly decide to visit Europe. If you do, we'll take good care of you. But for the time being, I hope you have a lovely time. And thank you all so much for watching us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.